that I have talked to and received a statement from Mr. Emery Anthony, attorney for Carly Russell. Mr. Anthony has scheduled a meeting for Carly to meet with investigators early this afternoon, but then I received an email stating that a statement was being provided by him on her behalf. Mr. Anthony asked that I read the statement entirely, which I will do now. My client has given me permission to make the following statement on her behalf. There was no kidnapping on Thursday, July 13th, 2023. My client did not see a baby on the side of the road. My client did not leave the Hoover area when she was identified as a missing person. My client did not have any help in this incident, but this was a single act done by herself. My client was not with anyone or any hotel with anyone during the time she was missing. My client apologizes for her actions to this community, the volunteers who were searching for her, to the Hoover Police Department and other agencies, as well as to her friends and family. We ask for your prayers for Carly as she addresses her issues and attempts to move forward, understanding that she made a mistake in this matter. Carly, again, ask for your forgiveness and prayers.
Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. And as you saw there, the Carly Russell matter is officially resolved as a hoax. We're going to talk about that this morning. And also, they're trying to kill me. That was the 911 call captured from an unarmed Black man who was being attacked by a police K-9 unit. We're going to discuss that this morning. And Elon Musk has rebranded Twitter, but really has he? I don't know if he can use the X. We're going to talk about that as well. And the latest in the new developments in the Tupac Shakur investigation in Las Vegas. A search warrant was served, as you know, last week. And this week, it is talk that a grand jury has now been impaneled. We're going to talk about latest in the murder of Tupac Shakur. What's next for Carly? Well, as we said, we'll find out. And the school board in Missouri has revoked its anti-racism resolution after it famously drafted and passed a resolution in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. We're going to discuss all that this morning. We got the managing editor of the Washington Informer with us, Misha Green. We got Dawn with us to the break of dawn. Dawn Montgomery, all the way from somewhere in the South. She's all over the South.
I'm in Decatur today.
See, there you go. She's in Decatur. And look, Dawn, so Power 96, he says that he is checking in from Birmingham. It is SWAC Media Day. And he said they gave the wrong person access. How about that? How come you had a SWAC Media Day?
Well, I stopped doing media days maybe 2 or 3 football seasons ago, but I'm wishing them luck. I know the SWAC Media Day, that was always one of my favorite ones to do. The SEC Media Days is a bit much, but like when you're doing SIAC Media Day, SWAC, and then CIAA, like all of those, like I think it's amazing that they're still going, they're still doing what they're doing. So shouts out to SWAC Media Day. Y'all have fun.
Yeah, we got to get Power 96 on to talk about sports one day, since he's doing the whole SWAC thing. I know Mimi knows some things about sports. I just know she's a sports fan. What's your team up to, Mimi?
Look, well, first of all, let me just shout out, because I am a native Washingtonian. I am very, very proud of the Washington Commanders right now. I have to shout out the home team, because we are now under new ownership. A lot of people were screaming, nah, 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 nah. Hey, 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 goodbye to Dan Snyder.
Yes, Snyder.
I think we have been in a place where we've been a little cursed, if you will. I don't have another term, but we're turning over a new leaf, and always, and on top of that, with a barrier breaking owner, only 4%, but that is Magic Johnson.
Irving Magic Johnson.
So I shout out to Power 96 doing the good work at SWAC Media Day. There's a lot happening here. We just took a look at Howard and Bowie in particular and the work that they're doing in preparation for their football season. But I have to shout out the Washington Commanders.
And Howard, speaking of Howard, Howard's homecoming is always something to see, right? It's always the big thing in DC. I've been to one Howard homecoming. That was years ago, though, before it really got really hip.
Stacey, we got to change that. I'm just going to assign something for you this year.
There you go.
You have to do Howard homecoming.
So ladies, let me ask you guys a question. Carly Russell. She's, of course, speaking of the South, the 25-year-old Alabama nursing student who claimed that she saw this toddler on the side of the road and she was abducted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now she's asking for forgiveness. It was, a hoax. I'm going to take it from this standpoint. If that was your sister, your niece, your daughter, what would you say to her? And I want both of y'all to answer that question and then say exactly whatever you want to say about it. We'll start with you, Mimi.
Well, that is my sister. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So in many ways, she is. And I'd say, girl, what were you thinking? I just straight up, a part of the beauty of the sisterhood that I am in, being a member of the illustrious sorority, is that we have to hold one another accountable for what they're doing. And so obviously, I think part of sisterhood and part of understanding is sitting down and listening, right? And so there's been a lot of thought to whether or not this was induced by a mental health breakdown or was this motivated by other challenges. And so sisterly, certainly I would sit her down and figure out what the motivation was. But part of my approach to a lot in the world is a little bit of tough love. Yeah, I know. Say it ain't so. She is certainly 08. But yeah, I think a little bit of that tough love in terms of figuring out, well, what happened? Why did this happen? There was a waste of significant law enforcement resources. And the big thing for me, particularly talking to another Black woman who is my sister, is that these cases are so incredibly important when you're talking about missing Black women and girls. Stacey just did an amazing piece for the Washington Informer where he broke down some of these statistics. Black women and girls are disproportionately affected by or are disproportionately missing here in the United States. I believe we make 7% of the population and about 36% of the missing cases right now. So these are critical numbers. It's a critical time. And so I would say, sis, right now you did something that could threaten how people view missing Black women and girls. And so those would be a couple of my words. Of course, I think that if God can give us grace, then we have to give other people. And so by no means am I here to condemn her. Forgiveness is certainly key, but we got to figure out why this happened and at least impress the importance of still taking missing Black women and girls seriously.
Yeah, Dawn, I know that I saw you shaking your head a few times. Agree with Mimi. Go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, I mean, like she said, I know on one hand she's her sister, but for me, there's no direct connection, but she's still my sister. And I just feel like as far as a community, as a Black community as a whole, we all know that we rarely get coverage when any of our people go missing. We rarely get coverage of the moments where we need the police to really show up immediately and do their jobs. And so I literally had to drive that stretch where she went technically, quote unquote, missing, right? Mm-hmm. And driving that stretch, it's one of those things where it was very eerie to know that, this ended up being a hoax, but to me, it was possible. To me, it could have been a thing. And the fact is that all that showed was like that the police department was willing to react. The police department was willing to do what they needed to do. And as far as I'm concerned, yes, she's going to get forgiveness all day. Now, was she wrong? Did she make a mistake? Yes. Do we need to know why she did that? Yeah, you need to tell us, girl, because, and when she's ready, because if she had a mental health breakdown, if she had, some type of panic attack, if she had something that created some type of trauma in her to create this moment, let's give her some space. Let's like what Misha said, give her some grace, because as far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of situations where what if the police had have shown up and she was having this mental breakdown and she was acting irrationally when they pulled up? Like, we don't know how that would have been, because if they would have realized that there was no baby, that there was no situation, that there was nothing happening, how were they going to respond to a Black woman in the middle of nowhere in the middle of Alabama? So there's so many other ways that this could have played out. I'm grateful that she is safe. I'm grateful that her family can be there for her. I don't really care to hear from her ex-boyfriend, because he could have just sat there and ate his food. But overall, for her, we just need to show her grace the same way that they would have shown a white woman if this had been a white woman in this situation.
Yeah, the thing about it is, and you guys are 100% right. It's something that people will forget about this in a couple of days. The way the news cycle works. Number one, but the thing here is, and Mimi mentioned the article. We've talked a lot with Derica and Natalie Wilson, who are the founders of the Black and Missing Foundation, and the hard work that they've done over the past 15 years. To try and bring attention to the plight, particularly of Black and missing women and girls. This is something that does kind of stings a little bit, and you hope that, here's the thing, you hope that it doesn't detract from other Black and missing women and girls, because the thing that Natalie and Derica always talked about, which is always true, is not only don't they get the media attention when they go missing, like whites and others, but they also don't get the law enforcement attention. In this case, Carly got both.
That part. And to me, it's one of those things where it's, I'm not for police in general, but I would like to commend them for even responding the way that they did, just because they did that. Like, we have to give credit where credit is due in this situation. And I feel like if we're going to be very transparent, very 100% just honest about this overall thing of whether or not this will happen for another Black woman, these people are going to choose whether or not they want to look for us or not. I mean, even Mike V just brought up a case that happened in St. Louis last year, where a lot of us were questioning why they never believed these Black women when they went missing, when one escaped, and then all of the things that was happening. I think overall, people are going to choose to believe what they want to believe. But in this instance, we have to make sure that as Black media, that we are looking to protect Carly in so many ways. Because even if she was a Black man, even if she was Hispanic, even if she was, Native American, Asian, we need to make sure that we protect those people who normally wouldn't get the coverage in these moments.
Yeah.
But it does make me wonder, though, was Carly's story so incredibly latched onto by police in the media because there was that narrative about a young white boy being involved in the process? This
of course. And the area, you have to think about the area too. That's Hoover, a missing child on our interstate or our highway. Oh no, we gotta go find that. And let's be honest, that was a huge motivator, because if there was a Black woman who went missing looking for a young white baby, yes, we need to find the baby. Even if it was one of those things where they're like, we need to find a baby, but we still need to say they responded, because at least they responded, because we know in so many other situations they would say, oh, give it a couple of days, or oh, you're gonna have to wait before you gotta let a certain cycle of hours go by before we can actually send out the troops, basically. But overall, I just feel like, let's not forget that part about it. and make sure that we shed light on that. But at the same time, be mindful, like they were still looking for this woman.
Yeah. And I, as you said, I think it's on us to really bring awareness to the numbers that continue to pile on every single day of the missing Black people in general, but particularly Black women are targeted in many cities and towns around the United States. And again, I hope that this raises awareness to the fact that we have to take missing Black women and girls seriously. If nothing came out of this, I think that I've seen a really good job of the Black press and even some mainstream media outlets. CNN did a piece a couple of days ago just listing some of the other missing Black people that we should be aware of. And so I think that hopefully it raises awareness that we have some work to do in not only taking missing people seriously in this country, but particularly young Black women.
Yeah, speaking of work to do, our next story, and just as a segue to our next story, I'm a couple blocks from the White House. I'm going to the White House today. The president is going to sign a proclamation dedicated some historic sites to Emmett Till and his mother, which is a huge deal when you think about the fact that this next story, when we think about lynching and we think about how police have treated African Americans historically, and then you think about the civil rights movement, which the Emmett Till murder and lynching really sparked the civil rights movement when his mother opened that casket for Jet magazine. An incident involving a police dog attacking a compliant semi-truck driver has ignited public outrage during comparisons to the dark era of the civil rights or pre-civil rights when police routinely unleashed dogs on Black Americans. The incident occurred on July 4th on U.S. Route 23 near Circleville, Ohio. It came to light just recently when body cam footage was released by the Ohio State Police. This is, a situation where this guy, he had his hands up, and you had other officers telling him not to release the dogs.
Don't release the dog. Do not release the dog with his hands up. Do not release the dog with his hands up. Do not release the dog with his hands up. Don't. Do not get the dog off of it. Get the dog off of it. Get the dog. Out the dog. Out the cab. Out the cab. Get the cab. Clear in the vehicle now. Put your hand back. Give me your hand. Give me your hand.
Bro, I have handcuffs on. What am I doing to you?
You could kick somebody. I don't want you to kick anybody.
I'm not gonna kick nobody. I just got bit by a dog.
I understand that.
Man, you don't understand. You don't understand. Did you get bit by a dog?
Do not get the dog off of it.
So here's the part of the startling thing about this is you actually had other officers saying, don't do that. Telling this one officer, the canine officer, don't do that. And yet, of course, there's always that one, right?
There's always that one. And it's very frustrating because one of the things we're probably going to hear is how maybe the dog got away from him. Now, let me tell you something. One thing I've known about these animals, especially animals that have like owners that they trust and that they listen to, they're just not going to randomly just outrightly, attack somebody. And I mean, even though we've seen police officers, the history of police officers and the canines attacking, Black and brown people in certain instances, like this is one of those things where you intentionally allowed that dog to do what it did. And the fact that we hear from all of the other officers standing around, which in my opinion should have actually put their guns down and reacted to help this Black man, to help get that dog, to help remove the dog away from him. But they didn't. They stood there and they watched it. So, I mean, on one hand, while I can commend, Hoover PD or whomever responded to going to go look for Carly. On this other hand, I'm like, no, y'all need some type of like punishment. Y'all need to be disciplined for that. Because in my opinion, if it were me, the dog might have caught a couple of strays because I would have shot towards it or something, like, you know what I'm saying? Like scared it for the most part. And it's just very frustrating because why would you let the dog like do what it did to him, versus like just really listening to your peers? And that goes to talk about the culture of police. Like literally, they think of themselves first and foremost, and then secondly, it's like you knew that dog, if you released it or if you even gave it a nudge, that it was going to do what it did. And so in my opinion, that was like that was premeditated, like you knew. So it's very frustrating to see that video and to hear him, crying out for help, and everyone else is just standing around, when in that moment those highway patrolmen, they could have done something more.
Yeah, Amisha, and then they're not only cuffing him, but apparently they're putting leg restraints on him too after he's been bitten.
Yeah, it's just a case of watching poor decision after poor decision being made in what should be, again, protecting and serving. And so we now know that we have a compliant suspect, if you will, in this case. Yes, he drove away, but once he was on the ground, and it's still not clear, we've seen from investigations, why he continued driving. But by the time he was on the ground, we hear the officers say, oh, well, do not release the dog with his hands up. We see him with his hands up. Even once he's on the ground, he's pretty much immobile because he's in so much pain on top of the restraints that they put on. And as Don so eloquently said, by the time they finished releasing the dog or getting the dog off of them, they should have been attempting to provide clear first aid. They say that first aid was provided afterwards, but not when you're trying to restrain a man's legs. It was really bothersome to watch. Of course, in many ways, the images took me back to the horrible pun, but dog days of the civil rights movement, right? But I also, I think it really, for me, is just another wake-up call that we're still fighting for freedom. The fact that it happened on the 4th of July, I think, is a sign to Americans that we still have so much work to do, and that we really aren't free until everybody's free. A lot of people, I think, Stacey, again, your article was one of the few that noted that in some of the coverage that I've seen, that police dogs in many ways are trained to look at Black and brown bodies as targets, even before they're told to go and attack. And we saw that particularly with this dog. I mean, that dog was ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
And while I completely, as a dog owner myself of two crazy dogs, as I call them, my crazies, and I know that when they're keyed up, it's sometimes difficult for me to stop something, but certainly that I think generally that comes from my temperament as well, right? And so these officers who are trained as handlers needed to remain calm, needed to have the authority to, at this point, talk to their worker, this dog, to stop them from to stop the dog from what he or she was doing. I mean, it was just bad decision after bad decision. And I think part of it came from them not keeping the composure to protect and serve from the beginning.
See, the Washington Informer a few years ago did and I forgot who did this story for the Informer, but I remember, why do we run? Why do Black people run, right? And here you have a situation, Dawn, where, again, he's hands up, he's compliant. And yet this still happens. And this is what many of the psychologists and psychiatrists and experts, mental health experts and others have pointed to as to why Black people run.
That's an initial reaction, like it's initial response. I'm not even gonna lie. I mean, if I was ever to be in that situation, my initial thought, like if I'm in my body, like just really, really thinking about it, I would be terrified. And if my initial reaction was to run, I'd just go for it. Honestly, like I think because of what I've seen now, I think I would try to talk myself into being calm, and trying to really just be mindful. Like the less that I do, the more I can even trigger them to even think that they can do something. But even in that moment, they're going to do whatever they decide they're going to do. So I don't know how we can work around that. But the fact is like he kept driving. He told you why he kept driving. There was no need for the dog to even get out of the car. No. There was no need for that. He was not posing any threats. So the fact that you let the dog out the car, because the dog ain't riding outside the car to where you just sat up there and you decided to let him go. You decided to let the dog out of the car because I know that they were technically trying to do an inspection of the truck, which the dog can also assist with. But as far as I'm concerned, if you have the person standing out there doing what they're doing with their hands up, not being opposing a threat, right? Literally, all you had to do was wait. Take the dog around around where the truck is and do your job, so I don't know how we can, talk to each other about, because we as a community, we have to have that conversation about how we react when we're pulled over. And even when we do the things that we're supposed to do, something always happens in these moments. But initially, like for him to really be as calm as he was in that moment, knowing that he's terrified, and you still did something towards him, that calls for some type of discipline, because you all chose to allow the dog to do what he did. And hell, if you can punish the dog too. He can get that too.
Punish the dog too. See, and again, Mimi, this is for years now. Activists, particularly African Americans, have been calling for the elimination of qualified immunity for these officers. The police unions stick up for them. The taxpayers, if they're sued, the taxpayers foot the bill. There's no responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a consistent issue historically. Obviously, we know it's systemically, the fact that they have this qualified immunity. But, I look at every other job pretty much, at least in the United States. When you do it wrong, you are fired and generally have to take public responsibility or accountability for what you do. And particularly, I look at what we do every day. When we make a mistake, the people are coming after us, and we have to take full accountability for what we do. Does it necessarily lose us our job every time? No, but a lot of mistakes would, right? A lot of mistakes won't make us trusted sources for media and information. And so I think in the same way, how can people trust the police? In so many ways, right? How can our people trust the police when time after time they're making just bad decisions, true mistakes in policing, in doing what they've been trained to do? It looks like a lot of that training goes out the window, right? If they're not being trained to attack or be racist to Black bodies, right? And if that's what they're being trained to do, then we see it very clearly and see the issue that is the systemic racism in our country play out every single day or regularly when it comes to law enforcement.
Well, that just might be the problem, right? That's how they are trained. We keep thinking that there's no training. Maybe that is the training.
Right. Well, I mean,
exactly.
You look at that dog and how can we think not? That dog was
period.
Because I was a black body. That, I hate to say
that dog. Look, that dog said, "I'm a police dog and I've got one job and that's my target." Like that's that. I hate to say, I can't think for animals, but what we do know is that this is how these dogs are trained. And if they're trained like that, then they're like that's going to be their initial. That's going to be their initial response every single time is to attack. They see a Black or brown body, they're going to attack. The same way that the police officer that leashed that dog out on this Black man, that's what they do. And so if we're talking about that and we're shedding light on this situation, we have to continue to kind of like put a spotlight on the culture, police culture. How and I mean, I'm out here in DeKalb County where they're trying to create, you know, a whole cop city and
Yes.
posing it as we've got to train officers. No, the hell you don't. You need to really use that money towards something that DeKalb County and Fulton County and the city of Atlanta or Metro Atlanta actually needs. And in a lot of these situations, if we had the money or the resources for mental health supports, or we had somebody else responding to some of these initial calls before the police arrives, then there wouldn't be a lot of us dying when we are calling for help or when we are stopped for minor traffic stops, like things of that nature. So it's very, very frustrating just overall. And the dog need to be punished. The officers standing around need to be punished. The officer who leashed the dog needs to be punished the most because he took the dog out the car and he was probably whispering in his ear, "Now we ain't gonna get him, but we gonna get him." Now wait a minute.
Well, look at Southbound 3000. It says something I think is interesting. It says, is PETA really doing their jobs? They say don't abuse animals, but attack humans. Something ain't right. Yeah. So where does PETA stand on this? Right.
We
Where
gotta
does these
ask PETA that.
organizations?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Where do they stand on this?
But here's the thing: one thing that we do know, and we have to be very honest with ourselves, if something happens to an animal, if something happens to a dog, if something happens to a cat, something happens to these animals, white people will get up in arms about them first before they get up in arms about a black or brown body or minority that has been harmed in such a way. So yes, we should be asking PETA these questions, and I'll tweet them a little bit later. What y'all gonna do about talking to the police and how they train their animals? Because that can be an abusive situation for them. We don't really know that. Nobody has really asked that question, in my opinion.
Dawn, look at that photo there. They memorialized the history of attacking Black people. Look at that.
That's ridiculous. But we're supposed to sit up here and think that wasn't, that was an accident. Oh, my bad. The leash got away from me. No. You knew what you were doing.
But I also, Southbound 3000, you have a great comment. But what comes to me immediately is that we've always seen that PETA folks prioritize, I think, animals over some of the other challenges happening. I won't say PETA folks, because let me take an organization out. It seems like animal rights tend to be sometimes more important than the rights of Black people, and animal lives being more value than Black lives. I think that statue right there says it all. At least historically, Black people have not even been seen as a full human. And so in many ways, yes, it's up to these other organizations to call out, like Don said, some of the training that might be even happening. We don't know how abusive they're being in training up these police dogs or these animals who are used as part of law enforcement. But I also think we know the truth. People don't value Black lives like they value animals often in this country.
Yeah. Well, Mike V puts the punctuation mark on it. He says these police dogs are also not trained in English. They are trained in Dutch, a European language for a European colonial agency over African people. Really, really interesting. Also, what's interesting, and we've been seeing a lot of this since the George Floyd murder and the national reckoning, so-called national reckoning that followed the killing of George Floyd. About 2,000 protesters took to the streets in the St. Louis suburb and urged the mostly white Francis Howell School District to address racial discrimination. The school board responded with a resolution promising to do better. Well, now the board, led by new conservative board members elected since last year, has revoked that anti-racism resolution, and copies of it will be removed from school buildings. The resolution passed in August of 2020, and it states, quote, pledges to our learning community that we will speak firmly against any racism, discrimination, and senseless violence against people regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, immigration status, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, or ability. We will promote racial healing, especially for our Black and brown students and families. Now that resolution is going in the garbage can.
And that's what you're going to start seeing across America. Because what we've seen is how a lot of these DEI experts, staff members that were hired on after, George Floyd's murder, they've all been fired. They've all been laid off. These programs are non-existent. I mean, it's becoming a thing. And I want people to be mindful. We always talk about local elections. And I think that that's one of the great things about Black media is we highlight and we talk about all elections and we talk about the importance. But I think for Black media, it's so important for us to continue to tell people you need to vote in your local elections. And one thing about those local elections is you get to elect who's on a school board. You get to find out what they're voting for, what they're talking about, what they're doing. You get to place people on a school board to where something like this would not happen. Now, I know for a lot of us, we work, especially parents. We work, we may not have time to go to some of these school board meetings. But one thing that I loved about my grandmother, the late Reverend Dr. Gertie Smiley, is that she was a community liaison for the Black community in Petal and Hattiesburg, Mississippi, respectively. And what she did is she worked, she was a pastor of a local church. She made sure that she was in connection with, working families. And a lot of these families could not go when their students or their child was being disciplined at school. They couldn't be there. So what they would do, they would call my grandmother, and my grandmother would drop whatever she's doing and she would show up to represent the family. Now, in the school board meetings, my grandmother would designate a group of people that would consistently show up and make sure that they could go back to their communities and talk to everybody about what's going on. I think we need to get back to that, because that's something that I grew up seeing. I've talked to other people who have lived across the South in the midst of some of these school board meetings that have been made national news, where in some pockets of a small town or some city where they came from, that was the same thing that they knew. There was always that one person who made sure that everybody knew about city hall meetings, town hall meetings. What was the city council voting on, the city council meetings, all of those things, and even school board meetings. We need to show up because this is what's happening. This is the long game for the GOP and their side. And I just feel like this does nothing but give us a preview of what we're getting ready to see swipe across, take over America. And people got to get ready because you have every right to vote these people in, or these people have been voted in, and you have every right to vote them out. If you weren't active in a school board election, you need to get active. If you have a little bit of time to yield or give to be on a school board, please put your name on the ballot, or please tell your people to vote for you. We need to take up more space along the lines of being mindful that they're taking over education. They are trying to erase all of us as if we're not, our kids aren't in these classrooms, as if our kids aren't in the homes where they're being taught these things, regardless to whether or not you're going to teach them or not. But this right here is very, very concerning because you're going to start seeing more protests about school boards and the decisions that they're making, and it's going to get ugly. It's going to start looking like summer 2020. It's going to start being a situation where we're probably going to start losing lives because of what school boards are doing. And if we don't get a grip now and start organizing now and continue to shed light on these situations, then it's going to get out of hand.
Yeah, Mimi.
I just have to say amen to my sister Dawn on everything she said. I think just to add to the importance of getting the community out to these meetings, to the things that that they can ensure not only that they know what is happening in the decisions that are being made about their lives, but getting their voices heard, is that we have social media. Dawn's grandma, the Reverend Dr. Smiley, did not have social media, the beauty of social media, when she was getting
That part.
the word around. And yet people were coming out and being informed and ensuring that their voices were heard. And so it truly is up to those who are informed to make sure that the community also has the information that is necessary for them to ensure that they are part of the decisions happening about their lives. And this is horrifying, what's happening in Missouri, but not at all a surprise, because as Dawn said, we're going to see this popping up all throughout the United States, and we already are. I also look particularly back at 2020. One of my favorite reads, if you will, in 2020 was the Black woman. I think she goes by KJ, but in Kansas City, when she talks about every single member, I believe it's of their city council. But I mean, she just reads them for filth and blood and everything, and the racist leaders that they are. And I believe that she does this post what we now know as this major landmark school board decision that's now been revoked.
Yeah.
But we know there are challenges all throughout the United States, but there are folks like KJ who I wish, I'm going to try to find it and send it to our producer Greer. How good is she? That's so, oh my gosh.
On the spot.
Like, how good is she? But y'all look at what KJ Brooks does, and I follow her to this day. And a lot of what she's about is letting the people know, show up to this city council meeting, show up to this school board meeting, show up to this block. This is where we're going to be to ensure that our voices are heard. And so all I can say is, in order to prevent issues like that, those of you that are tuning in, those of you that have a village and network that and platform that can ensure that your communities remain up to date on what's happening about decisions that influence their lives, make sure you're getting it out there. It's your responsibility. It's our responsibility. And particularly with something like this, I'm planning, right, even when it comes to the work that I do as a storyteller, because do we need to have a regular calendar of these are the meetings happening? Make sure you're there.
Yeah.
And I think so, because if not, we're going to see a lot of things like Missouri School Board play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we move on, ladies, with the raid on a home near Las Vegas last week, many are wondering what to make of this move nearly 30 years after the murder of Tupac Shakur. Forensic experts going to now test bullets found at the home of former gangland enforcer Keefe D to see if they are linked to Tupac's death. Vegas Metro Police revealed in a warrant that detectives removed several 40 caliber bullets from Keefe's residence this week. The judge approved a warrant of the home and a search of the home in Henderson, Nevada. And also investigators took manuscripts, computers, phones, and digital storage devices that allegedly belong to the Southside Crypt. So this is seems like it's getting interesting. But there was also, if you recall, a documentary with Keefe D, and he talked about the murder of Tupac. So why has this been such a mystery?
I mean, I think in the same way that we have been kind of doing this flip flop of how we're viewing the police right now, because again, yes, they did the right thing when it came to Carly Russell, but 1996, at a time where rappers or those involved in hip hop were facing violence and the threat of violence regularly. We had proof of that not only in the death of Tupac and Biggie, but also just sort of the feuds that were continuing to happen. I think it wasn't as big of a priority, as huge and major as Tupac's death was and continues to be. I think that when you're talking about potential gang relations and gang violence, there's a lot of inside things that even officers don't want to necessarily touch, and particularly a lot of people on the inside who won't talk or who won't give the type of probable cause information necessary for an arrest to be made. And then, I don't even know if this is worth anybody's time, but I'm going to say it. It doesn't help that I have talked to people who even I know, love, and trust, who are still on the "It's Tupac Day" train. That conspiracy, I just don't think serves anybody. The assumption should be that we lost him 27 years ago, and that there needs to be an answer and justice served for the loss of such a young, incredibly talented life. So that at least that's where I start in all of this, is that I don't think it was as big of a priority as it needed to be ever. And I think, again, I love that I keep going back to Stacey Brown's writing, but but he does a great job in touching on the fact that I think looking at Jay's passing and now having an arrest for it and more answers, I think allowed for the Las Vegas Police Department to kind of say, all right, well, we got to get some answers because it's been 27 years. I think when was Jam Master Jay's passing, Stacey?
2000 and I want to say 2001.
Okay, yeah. So you're talking answers significantly sooner, I think, than even Tupac.
Yeah. Jam Master Jay was 2002, October 2002.
Yes. Okay.
I'll never forget that. So first of all, what's his name? Keefe D? Yeah, him. Why would you go and be on interviews and talk about your presence and all of the things and not think that these people are not going to come and search your house? Let's start there. I feel like I do agree with Misha that there was no significance or importance for the police to kind of find who killed Tupac, because we also have to remember that East Coast, West Coast stuff that was happening between Biggie's death and then Tupac's death. And to me, as a whole, I feel like the government, because there are those of us who believe like the government is involved in some form of fashion. I feel like they kind of let it die down after like a couple of situations, like because there was a gang member who they were trying to put it on, but that person ended up dying due to gang violence like a couple of months later. And so in this situation, I feel like we do need justice to be served. We do need to know what happened on that night. But at the same time, it's we have to shed light on the fact that there are people that are doing the due diligence now. There are people, there's a young woman, I don't know her specific name, but she has a podcast called Tupac's Murder Was His Case. And she kind of highlights and she talks about that entire time in that case. And to me, with some of these podcasts, there's somebody listening to where they're like, now, wait a minute, something does not add up. And I just feel like that this is one of those moments where we have to tell the kids because it's technically their generation, because they're doing the research and they're wanting to know more, right? We have to tell the kids, please continue to look into stuff like this, because there's somebody who not only was Keefe D just on television or doing interviews and doing all of the things talking about this, but there's possibly somebody who looked into court cases, looked into, certain things that was happening during that time to kind of find a connection. And so, I also feel like in a lot of these situations, as some of our people get older, I feel like this, about various people, they just start running their mouths. Mm-hmm. And it's like, eventually you're going to find out who did what. So I don't see anything wrong with them utilizing the resources that should have been utilized back then to find who did this now. And we need to know if Keefe D knows more than what he's putting on, because if you can sit up here and you can brag about being on site of this like just horrific night for hip hop as a whole, then I feel like you actually may know who did this, or you may know how to get to the person. So yeah, I'm hoping that they can solve it. But I also just as a media person, I want to be mindful that we shine light on people who have these podcasts that are doing a deeper dive into cases like this, to where the police department is like, okay, now we saw this person on the interview, we heard what we heard on this podcast. Okay, we might need to do something about this.
Yeah, Keefe D wrote about this too, and he wrote that a lot of he and other gang members were upset with Tupac anyway. They said that he made erratic moves, and also he pretended, in their words, he pretended to be this gangster, and so they wanted to teach him a lesson. But Power 96 says Diddy might be a little worried right now. So, and that whole narrative with Diddy has been going around for a long time.
A very long time. For a very long time. So I'm with him on that. Like, I feel like even with Diddy, we're probably watching him go through his third or fourth midlife crisis. And and that's just me being nice about saying that. I just feel like he really needs to watch some of his associations and some of the people that he's been involved with and all of the things. And I mean, even like what we've seen with him and Ciroc more recently, like, you know, and Deleon specifically, you know, like, it's like, sir, there's always some type of bad business happening around you. Like, so I want him, it's cool to shine a light on the fact that, yeah, Diddy should be worried. And I'm just gonna be on the hopeful side of things and just hope and pray that Diddy didn't have anything to do with something like that.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, to Keefe D's comments about Tupac, I think that we see so much, again, Don, great point, that podcasters and media folks have been really diving into who Tupac was for the past 27 years. And I think a great way, just this year alone, I've seen Dear Mama, which I thought was a beautifully done documentary series.
It was phenomenal.
And so, you know, I think no matter what Keefe D says, we see who Tupac was. We learned that he was in many ways an erratic kid because he was a kid and angry about what was happening in the world and reacted to things as such at times. He was by no means a fake gangster. Tupac himself has admitted to shooting at people, but a lot of that came correct.
I was gonna say, if he was fake, I believed it. You know what I'm talking about? Like, because baby.
But you know, it also continues that narrative about the hip hop industry too, because was it yesterday or the other day, Quavo was on a ship and a yacht in Miami, and where passengers allegedly robbed. The real story is that they were upset that the captain was turning the yacht around, said the time was up, and whoever rented the yacht, the time was up, and they got upset and they pulled guns out on him, told him to keep sailing, that the party was just getting started. Quavo was for a time there placed in handcuffs, detained, along with several others while police sorted out, but he was not arrested. The police made it clear he was not under arrest. They did release him on the yacht. He left. But the other part of this is that he just went through a very, very awful experience with his Migos mate Takeoff. In that situation, you would think that the last thing he'd want to be is involved or around a situation that could include shooting.
I think, unfortunately, we see time and time again, as with Tupac, as with Biggie, as with, unfortunately, it's looking like playing out when it comes to Quavo, is that when you've been involved in such violence, you feel like there's this now constant threat. And so guns are going to be around, maybe even more guns, as opposed to necessarily separating yourselves from the situations. A lot of these people have been making money together since the very beginning, and having a crew of folks that they trust, but don't know how far to trust or who all can be around. We've all been in settings and doing interviews, et cetera, where these celebrities are surrounded by tons of people that they know, and so but not necessarily tons of people that they can trust. And so while it doesn't necessarily make sense, right, to the person who is saying you just lost your nephew to senseless gun violence, Quavo, why are you around these people? We see it happen time and time again where they feel like in order to be protected, more guns are around. And sometimes they even are involved in situations where one would think that you're inviting more violence. On top of the fact that I look at Quavo and I don't know how he's going on, and I see him at these parties and doing these things because he's in mourning. I mean, we're not talking about somebody who just lost their fellow bandmate, right, which was definitely certain, but that was his nephew who he grew up with. As someone who has a nephew 11 months younger than me, my youngest niece is only 9 years younger than me. I'm very close to my nieces and nephews. They are my world. And I can't imagine what somebody like a Quavo is going through. And so again, just to circle back to Tupac, right? People wonder, well, why were you around all those people? Why did blah, blah, blah. He had been attacked so many times. He had been jumped. He had been shot at. He had been stabbed, that he was around these situations because he was protecting himself in many ways. And I know it doesn't make sense, but we see it play out in the hood and in Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, we will see what happens with this investigation. Hopefully there will finally be some closure there, just like with the Jam Master Jay situation. I just remember Jay's situation so well. Dawn had to correct me on the year, but it turned out, and I think I said this before, that when Jay was being killed, I was actually steps away down the block. I didn't know it at the time until the next morning. And wound up covering his funeral. And at his funeral, I just remember, and his funeral was only blocks away from where he was killed, by the way. And looking up, there were SWAT teams on the roofs across the street from where the funeral was taking place. So it makes you wonder, you said earlier about everybody else's involvement, law enforcement's involvement. It makes you wonder, I mean, why was that going on? Jay was not known as a violent person, or he was not even known to hang with violent people.
Not at all. Not at all. And even for the attendees, like, you would think that this is a funeral. Like, what are you expecting to go down or happen here? So yeah, that's difficult. That's very difficult.
Absolutely. And we can't be losing Mimi's face now. Come on. Can't be doing that. But Dawn, before we go, we have to talk about X, or the artist formerly known as Twitter.
We don't have to do that. No, I really hope that it's one of those cases where it's going to be a blotched, rebrand, just because it's like, literally, if Microsoft owns X, Microsoft does not need to sell that to Elon. Like, hold on to that, keep it, or figure out how to buy Twitter from him, something, because Twitter has been trash since that man has gotten it.
Well, you said buy. Let me just say this. You said buy it from him. He's made it purchasable, if that's the word, because the price he paid for it was extremely more than what it was worth, and he's lost so much money on it. And now in my opinion, he's lost so much money because of him. Like, look at the things that he did once he bought it. You know what I'm saying? So
I feel like it's the person. Yes, he might have made it unpurchasable, but as far as I'm concerned, there's somebody out there that's got the money that can get it from him. You know, even if it's at a value discount, like grab this app from this man. You know, like and I think that this is one of those moments where for us as Black media, we have to make sure that people know that you don't just have to be on Twitter. You can be. I know that we existed as Black Twitter, and I love Black Twitter to like day in. Like I'm probably gonna have Black Twitter listed in my obituary, you know, someday. But the point of the matter is that we are all venturing off or migrating to other apps. Like we're on Fanbase, we're on Spill, we're on. I know there are some people that are still on Blue Sky. Blue Sky was not it for me. Some of us are still on Instagram. A lot of people are still on Facebook. I'm no longer on Facebook, and that's fine. But I feel like it's just important for us as a Black community on social media that we continue to make sure that we are in spaces where we can find our information, where we can get our news, where we can update each other and inform each other on what's going on, because that's what they're trying to kill before this presidential election. They are trying to keep us from being able to do this, and they're doing their very best. They're doing their very best, but I just feel like if all of us have, and I know that it's a lot because most people got 2 or 3 accounts out.
You want to unmute, Dawn?
Even if it's you just go and create an account on some of these other apps, especially like Spill and Fanbase, those are Black owned. We know that to be Black owned, both of them. So go and just create an account on there just in case, because if something goes down with Twitter and Twitter is just completely non-existent, where are we going to get this information? Where are we going to build? Where are we going to organize? Where are we going to strategize? That's my main concern. I could care less about this egotistical man trying to figure out how he can just fuck up something today and tomorrow and get on my nerves.
Miss Barrington.
She does. She is in her Barrington bag today, and that's fine. Look. At Tuesday, sometimes you got to get real with the language and all. And I will say that Mr. Elon Musk is, in many ways, just proving how much of a waste of time he really is on my brain cells, at least. I mean, yes. I do want to say I appreciated all the beauty that Black Twitter has given me over the years. Black Twitter, you have gotten me through some times. And so while I cannot leave the Twitterverse without at least acknowledging the contribution to culture that has been Black Twitter. I'm so over Elon Musk right now. The symbol X, I think, is just proof that this man is knows how negative he truly is. I mean, the symbol X in and of itself we use when we're saying no to something generally. And so are you saying no to your own brand, Elon? Is that what's really happening? Because I'm about ready to myself.
Listen. And the biggest thing about this is you sick of Elon. I'm sick of Jack. The man who founded Twitter, playing in our face, talking about just zeke through it. No, I'm not gonna zeke through nothing. It's a tweet, because you want us to call it a zeke. Are you kidding me? No. This is Twitter. If it's mama and daddy named it Twitter, that's what I'm gonna call it. Like, I'm not finna do all this.
No, absolutely. Now, this is what I have to say, because I'm with Dawn. Let's support these Black-owned social media platforms that we have. I thought that I was cool, and I've yet to receive a Spill invitation.
So
let me handle that. Let me handle that right now.
How do you use Spill? I mean, I Dawn sent me an invitation. I'm on Spill. I'm still a little confused.
You literally, so they have an outline and it breaks it down, but it's literally, to me, what the thing about Spill is I feel like it's way more interactive, if that makes sense. And I think that the platform itself, it looks different to a lot of people because it doesn't have just the outright like white background, or it doesn't have like the simplicity of where the font is smaller. It's bigger, it's in your face. So I feel like one of the things that I did for at least a week before I even started sharing codes, I was like, yo, I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to use this myself. And I think that that's where a lot of people are messing up, where they don't even use it themselves, or they haven't been on it long enough to kind of figure it out before they start inviting people to be on it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, bruh, so if I can go over here and I can use it as a more interactive type, platform where I'm using more video, using more GIFs, using more memes and all of that, because that's what we're known for Black Twitter. We're known for bringing in something that can reference, like take something up a little moment, like especially with our clips and things like that we save and that we can unleash at any time. I feel like Spill is open for that. It's more open for that. And as it grows, it's probably going to change its interface. It's probably going to change the layout and how it looks or whatever. But for right now, it's more of an interactive like platform. And that's my best way of describing it. You can put words on there and you can kind of share like updates here and there. But I feel like you get more traction when you're giving or posting like videos or a clip or a meme or GIF with your post on Spill. Okay. We should get the Spill people on here. Like, let me put in a good word. We should get the Spill people on here and get them to kind of, break down everything with it, so that we can get more people on there. That would be dope. Spillionaires.
Awesome. Yeah. Spillionaires. There you go. There you go. Well, we will look forward to that, Dawn. We know you can hook us up, so we are lean on you for that. Thanks so much, Dawn, as always, and of course, Mimi P. Green.
Yes,
the one and only. We thank you so much, the managing
editor of the
Washington Informer. We will see you all again tomorrow. Have a great day.
Bye.